Rin Calder moved quietly through the polished halls of the Emperor's floating station. The lights above shimmered like liquid metal, reflecting off the scales of dragons lounging in their golden chambers. Humans were everywhere but only as shadows, servants, cleaners, and waiters. They carried trays of glowing drinks and trays of food while trying not to draw attention. Any mistake could be fatal. Rin's hands shook slightly as he balanced a tray filled with crystal cups. He had worked here for almost a year, learning every rule, every path, every way to vanish when dragons passed. He knew that one misstep could mean death, and he had seen it happen. Still, the reward of a few extra credits and the small pride of keeping his family fed was worth the risk. Tonight was different though. The station buzzed with excitement. The Emperor Valerix was hosting a grand gathering of the dragon elite. Jewel-like scales glimmered in the crowd. Conversations crackled like fire, full of pride and subtle threats. Humans like Rin were invisible unless needed. He moved along the edge of the hall, keeping to the shadows, trying to appear as nothing more than a floating reflection on the walls. Then a sound stopped him. It was faint at first, almost like the whimper of a small animal. Rin froze, listening. The hum of the station and the clinking of cups masked it, but it was there, soft, pitiful, desperate. He looked around. No dragon seemed to notice. The crowd was absorbed in its own display of power. Guards walked past, too busy to see the world below their noses. Rin's heart pounded. He was supposed to ignore things like this, but something in that sound tugged at him. He followed it. Step by careful step, he moved away from the main hall and toward a series of corridors marked restricted access. A human janitor giving Rin a knowing nod from a distance only added to the strange tension. Even the janitor seemed to feel the urgency. The sound grew louder. A small, pitiful cry, full of fear and helplessness. Rin's mind raced. It can't be an animal, he thought. Animals aren't allowed here. It has to be a dragon. But dragons were never helpless, especially young ones in imperial care. Only the best were allowed to survive. And yet, the sound was real. He reached a door marked with the Emperor's sigil. Energy locks hummed, warning humans away. Rin hesitated, knowing that forcing this door open could mean instant death. But the cry came again, louder, sharper, full of life. Something inside him pushed all fear aside. With trembling hands, he accessed the door's emergency panel, a tool he had once borrowed from a maintenance deck. Sparks flew. Alarms began to blink faintly, but no guards had arrived yet. The door slid open and Rin stepped into a dimly lit chamber. There, cradled in a small energy field, was the baby dragon. Its scales were silver with flecks of blue, tiny wings trembling. Its eyes were wide with terror. The cradle was failing, lights flickering as energy leaked. The hatchling's cries echoed off the metallic walls. Rin's breath caught. He had seen dragons before, but never like this, small, fragile, vulnerable. The baby lifted its head weakly, looking at him with raw, frightened trust. It was impossible not to react. He knew he had seconds. The energy field was dangerously unstable. If it failed completely, the hatchling would be gone before anyone could even notice. But touching the child could also mean death for him. The rules were clear. No human may interfere with royal dragons. The punishment was swift. Rin's mind raced. He could run, hide, let the hatchling die. Or he could act. He chose to act. Using the tools he had brought, Rin carefully stabilized the cradle, rerouting energy lines, pressing circuits together with shaky fingers. Sparks flew and the hatchling hissed, frightened, but it did not lash out. Instead, it seemed to sense his intent, as if understanding he was trying to help. Minutes passed like hours. Each adjustment was risky. One wrong move and the hatchling could fry from energy overload, or he could be caught. He ignored the sweat on his brow, the heat of the chamber, the fear gripping him. His hands moved on instinct, trained by years of cautious work. Finally, the cradle stabilized. The lights glowed steady. The hatchling, still trembling, lifted its tiny wings and hissed softly, not at him but almost like a sigh of relief. Its large eyes, shining with iridescent color, studied Rin with a strange mixture of fear and trust. A sudden clang made him jump. Guards were near. They had heard the sparks. Rin froze, the hatchling still in his arms. He could see the patrol through the doorway, massive dragons with scales glinting, claws ready, eyes sharp. His chest tightened. He had only one choice: remain calm. The hatchling whimpered again, low and soft, curling closer to him. Rin held it tighter, careful not to hurt it. Time slowed. Each second was a lifetime. The guards approached the chamber. Their voices were low and dangerous, demanding to know what he was doing. Rin's mind raced. I have to make this work, he thought. I can't let it die. Not like this. Not here. Not now. Before the guards could enter fully, the energy panel on the cradle gave one final pulse, stabilizing completely. The hatchling opened its mouth and let out a tiny roar, not loud enough to shatter the walls but full of life. The guards stopped, eyes widening. They expected death, failure, silence. Instead they saw a human holding a living, breathing royal dragon hatchling. Rin's heart pounded in his chest. He knew what came next might be his last moment alive, but for now the baby dragon was safe. And for the first time he realized that something had changed. Something small, fragile, and alive had chosen to trust a human. And in that instant, the world outside the chamber, full of rules, fear, and centuries of dragons ignoring humans, had begun to shift. Rin held the baby dragon close, its tiny body trembling against his chest. Its scales were warm, almost hot, and he could feel its heart racing as fast as his own. He knew the guards would be in the chamber any second. Every rule he had ever learned told him to drop the dragon, to leave it to the dragons who owned it. But he could not. Not now. Not when life was so fragile in his hands. The first guard reached the doorway, his golden eyes widening as he saw Rin. Human, the dragon barked. Step away. His voice was sharp, full of authority, but it faltered when he saw the hatchling alive and trembling in Rin's arms. Rin swallowed. His mouth was dry. He forced himself to speak, his voice steady. It's alive. It was going to die. I saved it. The guard stepped forward, claws extended. You dare touch the Emperor's child? Do you understand what this means? Yes, Rin said. I know exactly what it means. But I couldn't let it die. Another guard arrived, larger, with black and blue scales glinting in the dim light. He studied Rin, anger flashing in his eyes. Do you have any idea what your punishment will be? You've interfered with royal blood. Rin's heart pounded. He knew the penalty for touching a royal dragon without permission was death. And yet, he could not bring himself to let the hatchling die for rules he did not understand. Then kill me, he said quietly, but don't let it die. The guards froze. Their surprise was clear. A human willing to die for a dragon? Some had never seen such courage. Others felt anger and fear. The rules had been broken. The law was absolute. Nothing had ever challenged it. At that moment, the chamber door opened wider. A hush fell as Emperor Valerix entered. His scales shone like liquid silver and blue, and his presence alone made the guards shrink back. All eyes turned to him. He looked first at the hatchling, curled safely against Rin's chest. Then he looked at Rin. His eyes were sharp, bright, and terrifying in their intensity. Explain, Valerix said. Not a question but a command. Rin swallowed again, gripping the hatchling tighter. Your Highness, the cradle was failing. I couldn't leave it. It would have died. I acted fast. I only wanted to save it. Valerix's eyes flicked between the guards and the human. Silence filled the room. The hatchling made a tiny chirp, nuzzling Rin's hand. The Emperor noticed and something in him shifted. He had raised dragons for centuries. He had never seen one respond to a human like this. Most hatchlings shrank from humans, fearful and wary. This one, it trusted him. It clung to him. Valerix raised a claw. The guard stepped back immediately. Step aside, he commanded. They obeyed. And you, he said looking at Rin, you are a human. A creature meant only to serve or vanish. I know, Rin said. But I did what had to be done. The Emperor studied him. No human had ever dared speak like this. Most would have begged, pleaded, or begged for mercy. Rin had not. Rin had simply acted. The guards whispered among themselves. Could a human really act with courage without fear of death? It was unheard of. One even whispered, this human could endanger everything if he disobeys again. Valerix ignored them. He looked at the hatchling again. Its wings fluttered slightly, tiny and delicate. Its eyes were bright and alive. He realized that if the human had not acted, his child would be gone forever. Rin's hands were scratched and burned from the energy cradle, but he held the hatchling steady. He could see the Emperor's curiosity growing, a feeling he had never witnessed in centuries, doubt. Do you understand what you have done? Valerix asked. His voice was low, calm, but powerful. Yes, Rin said. I saved a life. I did what anyone should do if they could. Valerix's eyes narrowed. And if that choice had failed? If the hatchling died and humans knew it was your fault? Rin did not flinch. Then I would have accepted the consequence. I knew the risk, but I had to try. I could not leave it to die. The Emperor's silence was long. The chamber felt heavy. Guards shifted uneasily. Some dragons muttered under their breath about human foolishness. Others were silent, watching the Emperor, waiting. Finally Valeric spoke. You have broken every law of the Empire. He stepped closer and Rin could feel the heat of his presence. Yet you have saved something I valued more than all my power. Tell me, why? Rin looked up, meeting the Emperor's eyes. Because life matters, he said simply. No matter who it belongs to. No matter what law says. If you can save a life, you do it. The Emperor stared. The hatchling chirped again, climbing slightly higher on Rin's chest. Its small claws rested gently on him and Rin smiled softly. It trusts me, he said. Valerix's expression softened in a way few had ever seen. For centuries, dragons had relied on strength, fear, and power. Humans relied on nothing but choice, action, and courage. The Emperor realized something that had been invisible to him. Humans could act where dragons hesitated. Humans could see failure and act before it became fatal. The guards shifted nervously. Some wanted to protest, but the Emperor raised a claw. Silence returned. The hatchling chirped again and nuzzled Rin's cheek. Valerix saw the connection clearly. Rin's choice had not only saved a life, it had shown a way of thinking dragons could not understand. One human had dared to do what no dragon would. Risk death to save a life for no gain, no glory, no reward. The Emperor finally nodded slowly. You are alive because this hatchling lives, he said. And because I choose to honor that. But know this, the risk you took, it could have ended a species. Rin swallowed, heart still racing. I know. And I would do it again. Valerix looked at the hatchling, then back at the human who had changed his perspective in a single moment. A quiet thought grew in his mind. Perhaps humans were not weak. Perhaps they were something else entirely. Something dragons had never understood. And in that quiet, tense chamber, a bond had been formed. The hatchling, the human, and the Emperor, all watching each other carefully. The world outside would never be the same again. Rin was led through vast corridors of gold and silver, the hatchling still clinging to his chest. Every step echoed like a drumbeat of judgment. The humans who passed him avoided his eyes, whispers floating after him. He dared touch the Emperor's child, and survived. The council chamber was massive, a dome of shimmering crystal and molten metal. Flames danced in suspended braziers, casting light across the faces of dragons older than any human could imagine. Their eyes glinted with suspicion, pride, and fury. This was the throne of fire, where the most powerful dragons judged all. Rin had never seen so many of them in one place. The Emperor Valerix led him to the center. He gestured with a claw, and the hatchling squeaked, shifting closer to Rin. The dragons on the council hissed and muttered. Some bared their teeth. Others simply watched. Human, the eldest counselor said, scales dark and jagged, do you understand what you have done? Yes, Rin said. His voice did not shake. I saved a life. Do you understand that touching a royal dragon without permission is punishable by death? Another counselor asked. His wings flicked with irritation. Do you understand that one wrong move could have ended the Emperor's line? Rin nodded. I understand. A ripple of surprise ran through the council. No human had ever answered so directly. Most would beg, plead, or collapse in fear. Rin did not. He only held the hatchling, whose small wings trembled but whose eyes were bright. The Emperor raised a claw. Enough, he said. Silence fell immediately. This human's actions are unprecedented. His courage, his choice, it has saved my child. And yet, he has broken every law in the book. Murmurs echoed across the council. Some dragons hissed in anger. Does this mean we allow humans to decide when to touch royal blood? One asked. To act without permission? Valerix's eyes were cold. It means we reconsider everything we thought we knew. He looked at Rin. Tell me, human. Why did you risk your life? Why did you touch what no one else may touch? Rin straightened. Because a life matters. No matter who it belongs to. If I could save it, I had to try. That is all. Another counselor laughed, low and sharp. Foolish human. You do not understand power. You do not understand fear. You gamble with lives that are not yours. Rin met the counselor's gaze. I understand enough to know that rules mean nothing if a life is gone. The chamber went silent. Dragons, powerful beyond imagining, were unused to hearing such defiance without trembling. Some frowned. Some whispered. Others shifted uneasily. Humans were supposed to be small, powerless, invisible. And yet, here one stood, unshaken, holding a life they could not claim. The hatchling chirped softly, nudging closer to Rin. Its small claws rested on his hand and the council noticed. It was unusual, almost impossible, for a royal hatchling to seek comfort from a human. Usually they shrank from them, wary and fearful. But this one trusted Rin completely. Valerix leaned back slightly. "Do you see it?" he asked the council. "The hatchling clings to him. It chooses him over any dragon here." The council murmured. Some faces showed shock. Others were angry. One elder hissed, "It is an abomination to let a human hold the child. This is not how the world works." Valerix's gaze was steady. "Perhaps our understanding of the world is incomplete." His voice was calm but carried the weight of centuries. "Humans act differently than we do. They see danger and act before it consumes them. They are small, but they choose courage when none is expected. They risk everything not for power but because they care." Rin felt a flicker of hope, but he stayed still. The council's judgment was still uncertain. Death was still a possibility. He only held the hatchling tighter, letting its warmth steady his own trembling heart. Another counselor stepped forward, wings wide, scales glinting like fire. "And if this choice had failed?" he asked, voice sharp. "If the hatchling had died in his hands, would we celebrate or execute him?" Rin looked up calmly. "Then I would accept the consequence. I knew the risk, but I could not let it die. No one else would." The council was silent again. Many had never considered such thinking. Dragons survived by strength, by domination, by controlling what they could. Humans survived by choice, by courage, by responsibility. And Rin had shown them that clearly. Valerix's eyes softened as he studied the human. "You have changed the meaning of loyalty and courage in this chamber. You have forced us to see what we ignored for centuries." The eldest counselor's claws tapped the floor. "So you spare him, because he succeeded?" Valerix shook his head. "No. We spare him because he acted rightly. The result is not always what matters. The choice, the courage, the care, that is what matters." Rin's chest tightened. He had done what he thought he must, and it had been enough. He realized that dragons, creatures so much larger and older, were learning from him. And for the first time in his life he did not feel small. The hatchling chirped again, curling even closer to Rin. Its small, fragile life had survived because of him. And now, the dragons around him were seeing a truth they had never expected. Humans were not weak. Humans were capable of choices dragons could not understand. Valerix looked at Rin and the hatchling together. "From this day no human may act against law without consequence," he said, "but we will also remember that courage is not measured by size, but by action. This human has taught us that." The council murmured, some angry, some thoughtful. Rin simply nodded, letting the hatchling rest against him. His life had been spared, not because of luck, not because of law, but because he had acted with heart. And in that moment, the Throne of Fire learned something new, that even a small, simple human could shape the fate of dragons. After the council meeting, Rin was allowed to leave the chamber, still holding the hatchling. The halls of the Imperial Station felt different now. The humans who passed him no longer avoided his eyes. They whispered quietly, some nodding with respect, though fear still lingered. Even the guards who had stared daggers at him before now glanced with hesitation, as if unsure how to treat a human who had changed the Emperor's mind. Rin walked slowly, placing the hatchling carefully in a small room prepared for it. The energy cradle had been repaired under supervision, but the little dragon did not want to leave him. It nudged his hand, chirping softly, wings trembling with every movement. Rin smiled. "You're safe now," he whispered. "I promise." The Emperor observed from a distance, still silent. Valerix had spent centuries surrounded by dragons who obeyed rules, by humans who served, and by systems he trusted without question. But now the Emperor realized how fragile his understanding had been. Humans did not follow rules because they feared death, they acted because they cared. Valerix began to watch Rin closely. He followed the human through the station, unseen, noting how Rin moved. He saw the small actions that made life continue, fixing a leaking pipe before it flooded a hallway, offering water to a tired guard, calming a frightened human child. None of these acts were ordered. None were rewarded. Humans acted quietly, but their care was constant. He remembered the hatchling's trembling eyes in Rin's hands, how it had chosen a human over dragons stronger and older. And he realized that dragons often ignored the small, fragile, and unseen. Humans noticed them. Humans acted for them. The Emperor called a meeting of his personal advisors, dragons who had always valued strength over caution. He explained what he had witnessed, how a human had saved a life, how that life had been his child, and how the human had risked everything for it. Many dragons were skeptical. It is an exception, one said. Humans are weak and fragile. They cannot be trusted with power. Valeric shook his head. They are not weak, he said. They see danger before it arrives. They act without fear of glory. They care when we cannot be bothered. Their strength is not in muscle or flame, but in responsibility and courage. The advisors were silent. Some were uncomfortable. Others whispered behind claws. Valeric continued. If we ignore them, we risk more than we know. This human showed me the truth. The smallest creature may hold the key to survival. Meanwhile, Rin returned to his duties, unaware that the Emperor was observing him. He carried trays, cleaned floors, and guided other humans quietly. Everything he did was small and ordinary to him, but to Valeric each action was extraordinary. Humans survived where dragons would fail. Humans noticed details dragons considered unimportant. Humans acted when dragons hesitated. One day the Emperor sent a guard to deliver a simple message. Rin, the guard said, the Emperor wishes to see you. Rin's heart pounded, but he went without hesitation. The hatchling chirped softly and nudged him as if sensing the importance. Valeric waited in a quiet observation room, his child curled nearby. You did not ask for reward, the Emperor said. You did not beg for favor. You acted because it was right. Tell me, human, why do you act without power? Rin looked up, calm but sincere. Because life matters, he said. Because someone must act when others will not. Because waiting for permission often means it is too late. The Emperor studied him. No dragon had ever said anything like that. Dragons acted to control, to dominate, to show strength. Humans acted because they chose to care. The difference was profound. Valeric realized something else. Humans could see failures dragons ignored. They could prevent mistakes, protect the weak, and act quietly where dragons relied on fear and authority. Humans were small, yes, but in that smallness lay power dragons could not measure. The Emperor began to change the rules of his station. Human caretakers were now allowed to assist with hatchlings. Human workers were trained to observe danger and report it. Humans were no longer invisible, they were essential. Rin continued his work, unaware of the changes. But every day he saw dragons noticing humans more closely. Hatchlings would chirp for him, guards would hesitate before punishing a human, and even advisors watched more carefully. Valeric did not interfere overtly, but his quiet decisions rippled through the station like fire. The hatchling grew stronger under human care. It learned to trust not only Rin but other humans as well. Dragons began to see the difference. They saw that humans acted without expectation. They saw that humans protected life because they valued it, not because it increased power. One evening, Valeric stood in the observation room, watching the hatchling sleep near a group of humans. He remembered Rin's courage, his choice to act, his quiet strength. And he understood something he had never admitted: humans were not weak. Humans were not servants. Humans had a value dragons had ignored for centuries. In the quiet of the station, the Emperor made a silent vow. He would never underestimate humans again. Their actions were small but their impact could be enormous. He had seen one human save a life where dragons had failed, and that one act had begun to change the entire empire. Rin did not know he had done so much. He did not seek recognition or reward. He simply acted. But the Emperor and soon the entire station had learned the truth humans were never asked about. Strength was not always in size, power, or fire, it was in courage, choice, and care. And for the first time in centuries, Valeric looked at humans differently. Rin returned to his ordinary work the next morning, carrying trays of food and water, cleaning floors, and guiding humans quietly through the halls. Nothing had changed for him. He still obeyed rules, still avoided attention, and still smiled softly at the small tasks he completed. Yet, outside of his knowledge, the entire imperial station was different. The Emperor Valeric watched from a distance. He had spent centuries ruling dragons, relying on power, fear, and control. He had never needed humans for anything beyond service. But now he understood that humans had quietly saved not just his child but the empire itself. The hatchling had grown quickly under human care. Rin was careful, gentle, and consistent. The small dragon began to chirp for him, follow him, and even play beside him, learning trust, curiosity, and patience. Valeric noticed the change in the hatchling and how it reacted differently to dragons than to humans. The dragon was stronger, calmer, and more confident because of the human beside it. The Emperor called a private meeting of the council. "Observe," he said quietly, gesturing toward the hatchling as it interacted with Rin. "This human has taught my child more than we could have in a lifetime of dragon lessons. Notice the calm, the focus, the courage. Observe the care that guides growth. The council watched in silence. Dragons of centuries of experience could not deny the truth. Humans were small, yes, but they acted where dragons hesitated. They noticed what dragons ignored. They chose responsibility over dominance. Valerix nodded slowly. We have relied on fear and strength for centuries. And yet, this human shows us a different way. One choice, one act of courage has changed everything. Rin, unaware of the council's observation, was busy ensuring that the hatchling had enough food. He spoke softly, telling it simple things about the world outside, about safety, about care. His words were gentle, his hands steady. The hatchling chirped back, wings fluttering as if it understood every word. The Emperor walked closer, quietly. He had never seen the value of human action like this. Dragons could burn cities, crush mountains, and command fleets, but humans could save life without power. Humans could act with thought, foresight, and courage without needing domination. Valerix remembered the moment Rin had first held the hatchling. The small creature had been helpless, and yet the human had acted without hesitation. That single choice had shown him something dragons had ignored for centuries, that life could be protected without force, that courage could exist in the smallest of beings, and that care could be stronger than power. From that day, new rules quietly went into effect. Humans were allowed to assist in the care of hatchlings, trained not just to serve but to notice, protect, and act when danger came. They were no longer invisible. Their work was valued, and slowly dragons began to see them differently. Some still doubted, but most began to understand the importance of responsibility without domination. Rin continued his daily routine, unaware that he had begun to change the empire. Yet his actions mattered. The hatchling now chirped at him before it even noticed any dragon, and soon, other hatchlings began to follow humans as well. The Emperor noticed and nodded quietly, understanding that the bond between human and dragon was not weakness, but a strength dragons could not fully measure. One evening, Valerix called Rin to the observation room. The hatchling perched happily on Rin's shoulder, chirping softly. "You have done more than I can measure," the Emperor said. "You did not seek glory. You did not ask for reward. You acted because it was right. And in doing so, you have changed how I will see humans forever." Rin looked at the Emperor, surprised. I just did what I could," he said softly. The Emperor smiled, a rare expression of warmth across his massive, scaled face. "And that is exactly why it matters. Life is preserved not by power but by courage, by care, by choice. Humans have taught me that in one moment." The hatchling chirped again, leaning into Rin's hand. Valerix watched quietly, the weight of centuries of rule pressing on him, but also a sense of understanding that had never been there before. Humans were small, yes, but their strength was quiet, constant, and impossible to ignore once seen. Over the following months, the Emperor observed humans more closely. He watched their daily work, their care for fragile creatures, their patience and foresight. He saw that they acted for life, not for glory, and that their courage was steady even in the face of death. Slowly, dragons began to respect them, not out of fear, but because humans had earned it silently. Rin remained humble. He did not seek recognition or power. He continued to work, to serve, and to protect, small actions with enormous consequences. The hatchling grew strong, playful, and wise, guided by Rin's care. Other dragons began to notice how humans improved the lives of young dragons, how small acts of responsibility could prevent disaster. Valerix stood in the observation room one evening, watching the hatchling sleep peacefully near a group of humans. He remembered the first day, the fear, the choice, and the courage. He realized that humans did not need power to be great. They acted because they could, because they cared, and because they chose life over fear. In that quiet moment, the Emperor made a promise to himself and to his empire. Never again would he underestimate humans. Their actions, small and unassuming, had the power to shape the galaxy in ways dragons could never achieve with force alone. Rin did not know how much he had changed the world. He did not know that his courage had shifted centuries of tradition and thinking. He simply continued to act as he always had, caring for life, protecting the weak, and choosing responsibility over fear. And for the first time in centuries, the Emperor, dragons, and the entire Imperial Station saw humans in a new light. Small, yes. Fragile, yes. But capable of courage, care, and strength beyond measure. The galaxy would never look at humans the same way again.